There's something that's been recently coming up in the tower defense genre on Roblox, and it revolves around developers having an obsession with graphics, animations, and visual effects. If you look at any of the mainstream tower defense games on the platform currently, games like Tower Defense Simulator and the multitude of anime tower defense games that are nothing else but a gacha, this becomes quite apparent. In this day and age where children think that graphics themselves can define a game, it is very easy for developers to just have oversaturated lighting and a bunch of fluid animations. One case of this ringing true is the aforementioned Tower Defense Simulator, a game that is literally on the front page currently. The developers have time and time again shown that they only care about having the craziest and most creative animations on the platform, paired with insane models for that matter, which isn't something a tower defense game developer should be proud of. What a tower defense game developer should be proud of is having captivating gameplay, something that TDS has barely ever provided to their player base after 2022. The game had a few cool concepts that were innovative at the time, but they quickly forgot about making interesting concepts. Of course, one of them that has been tilted and twisted all around is Defend the Center. And I won't bother giving you a history lesson to how it was changed so many times. That goes off the video's topic. Although, as a contrast, let's look at a game such as World Tower Defense. A very hard tower defense game that has strategy written all over it, accessories that can change your playstyle entirely, and a gameplay loop that uses tower health and doesn't simply just throw in some enemies that just one-shot your towers. The art style itself is quite simple and isn't the main focus of the developers. It doesn't get shoved into your face that the game has insane animations or visual effects. And with that said, I think I should mention the elephant in the room. Why are simplistic art styles much better than the much more detailed ones? For that, we will have to once again look at games such as Pixel Gun Tower Defense. The game is very simplistic in its art direction. It doesn't have some insane models like you'd expect when games like Tower Defense X or Tower Defense Simulator exist. The game relies heavily on simplistic Roblox accessories for both enemies and towers. The maps are also very simplistic. They don't have some crazy modern models or anything. More often or not, I see a huge mistake that most tower defense developers do is focusing on the map, adding as many details as they can, only for nobody to really care. There's also games that tend to strive away from their original art style. To put as an example, Doomspire Defense. The game has mostly an art style resembling the classic Roblox era, although some enemies tend to look a bit more modern. This can also lead to another point that I have, where having a simplistic art style often lets the developer focus more on the gameplay and not spend major funds on just having a really detailed art style. It can also heavily boost performance. One major critique with games such as TDX, TDS, or maybe even Doomspire Defense is often that they are incredibly unoptimized. One of the major reasons is because those games in particular, maybe except Doomspire Defense, are incredibly detailed. They have a lot of visual effects that cannot be turned off for some reason, and they have really detailed models. Developers often don't seem to realize that simple mistake for some reason. I think another thing to touch on when it comes to graphics is how short of a lasting impact they have on a player. When I look at a tower defense game, it's often that the graphics do not make an impression on me, since I don't really care about them. From what I've seen from examples of my friends, is that they say the graphics are cool for a tower defense game, or they look like absolute shit, and after an hour or two of playing said tower defense game, they don't really pay attention to the graphics or details, since when you're playing a tower defense game, you usually never actually look at the visuals unless you really force yourself to. You usually only focus on the path that the enemies take, and that's all there is to it. There aren't many tower defense games out there that focus on visuals. It's a minority of the genre on the platform. It tends to be the big shots, but I have made this video for one reason, and that's to warn other aspiring game developers that want to make a tower defense game to not make this mistake, to not let themselves think that visuals is all there is to a tower defense game, to not tread down the same path as certain other games. Graphics alone can never define a game. It doesn't matter if it's a tower defense game or not. There has to be a balance between visuals and gameplay, because if there isn't, you'll have a gorgeous game that won't last long because it doesn't provide sustenance with its gameplay. I can give you an example of such a game, or at least a subgenre of games: anime tower defense games. As I've mentioned previously, these games will focus on having the most outstanding visuals and animations, but all of them, and I mean absolutely all of them, do not even try to give their own spin on the gameplay whatsoever. All of them have this really weird habit of having an oversaturated art style. They do not try to incorporate dark colors whatsoever, and obviously I can't speak much of those games since I haven't really played them at all, but this is just an example. And if it wasn't obvious enough, this isn't only a problem with tower defense games on the platform. It's every single game in the industry. But tower defense games on Roblox are only a minority of that. Alright, with that said, I can basically end the video right here. I hope you enjoyed this video, since this topic is a pretty interesting one. I think people should really talk about graphics not being an important part of a game, especially on a platform like Roblox. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, I would be so glad if you subscribe, since I'm trying to get to my dream 1,000 subscribers. And maybe like the video as well. Alright, this was your host, Virus Detected, now clocking off.